Hello everyone, welcome to Frightful Whispers. I'm here to guide you into the shadows tonight. I know you're using this video to unwind and drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let the whispers of the night take over. I never believed in the supernatural. I was always the rational one. The kind of person who would look at a flickering light and brush it off as a power surge or chalk up an eerie feeling to an overactive imagination. I'd always lived my life in the tangible world, convinced that nothing existed outside of logic and science. But that night shattered everything. It started like any other evening. The kind of night I should have relished. The kind of night I dreamt about during my hectic workdays, a rare, quiet evening at home. The storm outside battered the windows, but inside, everything was calm. James was in the kitchen, humming to himself as he prepared dinner. I was curled up on the couch, sipping a glass of wine, trying to distract myself from the stress of the week. I didn't expect the storm outside to be the least bit unsettling, but somehow, everything felt wrong. The warmth of the apartment, the soft glow of the lamp, it should have felt safe. But instead, it felt distant, like I was merely a spectator in my own life. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows, and I found myself staring at my architectural sketches scattered across the coffee table. They were half-finished, some discarded, others carefully planned out. But none of it mattered. The lines on the paper, the sketches I'd slaved over for days, they seemed so meaningless now, like they were just reminders of how fragile and predictable life could be. I shook my head, trying to focus on something, anything, other than the gnawing sense that something wasn't right. I took a sip of my wine, hoping it would help clear my mind, but the tremor in my hand didn't subside. It wasn't from the wine, I knew that. Something felt off, something I couldn't explain. Then the light flickered. It wasn't the usual glitch, the kind of flickering that happens when the storm outside rattles the power lines. This felt different. A kind of unnatural distortion, like the air itself was shifting, breathing in time with my own confusion. I glanced around the room, my heart suddenly racing. The apartment seemed to close in on me. The walls felt too close, as if they were folding inward. I stood up, needing a distraction. I moved toward the window, drawn to it, almost against my will. The night outside was darker than usual. The storm had hidden the stars, leaving the world in a thick, suffocating darkness. The trees swayed violently, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. And then, I saw him. A figure. Standing in front of the building across the street. I couldn't see his face, only a silhouette against the dim streetlight. But there was something about him. Something familiar, something terrifying. He stood perfectly still, staring directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped back, my pulse quickening. The man didn't move, not even an inch. The storm continued to rage around him, but he remained eerily still, watching. I turned away from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to brush off the feeling of dread creeping up my spine. It was just the storm, just the darkness playing tricks on my mind. But as I turned back to face the room, I froze. The phone was ringing. I hadn't heard it before, not once. But now it was ringing, loud and insistent. My stomach twisted. The caller ID read, Rachel Adams. My hands shook as I reached for the phone. Who would be calling me from my own number? I didn't think. I just answered it. Hello? My voice cracked. I hated how weak it sounded. I felt absurdly vulnerable in that moment. The voice on the other end was mine. But it wasn't mine. It was distorted, like it had been stretched and pulled through a tunnel, echoing and broken, as if it had been through too many lives to remain pure. Rachel, listen to me. You need to get out of here. It's already started. I froze. My body went cold. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, every instinct in me screaming to hang up, to shut this all out. But I couldn't. Something in the voice held me, tethered me to it. Who is this? I demanded, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice, my voice, responded almost desperately. You're in danger. You need to leave. Don't wait. Go now. It's too late. You have to change it. Change everything. The words made no sense. Not really. How could I change something that I didn't even understand? What danger? What are you talking about? The voice on the phone trembled. You have to stop him. You have to stop yourself. And then, before I could even react, it went dead. I stared at the phone, the silence now suffocating. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion. What had just happened? Was it a prank? My own voice, the warning. I could still feel it in my bones, gnawing at me. I looked around the room, my mind still spinning. My pulse was too fast, my thoughts a jumbled mess. The apartment, which had felt so familiar just moments ago, now felt wrong. The walls seemed to close in around me. Everything felt off, like I was on the edge of something, teetering towards something I couldn't understand. I didn't know what to do, I didn't know where to go, but I knew something deep in my gut, told me I couldn't stay here, I wasn't safe. James, I whispered, turning toward the kitchen. He was still there, humming as he cooked dinner. He didn't seem to notice the growing storm inside me, the way the room seemed to hum with a presence I couldn't name. What's wrong? James asked, looking at me curiously as I stood there, frozen. I couldn't finish. The words wouldn't come. How could I explain this to him? How could I tell him that I had just received a warning from myself, from a future I didn't understand? Before I could speak, the phone rang again. I didn't even hesitate this time. I picked it up in a daze, feeling something tighten in my chest. The voice on the other end was the same. My voice. I told you, it whispered. You didn't listen. It's already too late. I sank to the floor, my hand clutching the phone like a lifeline. But there was no escape. There was only the voice, my voice, sinking deeper into my bones. And I realized, with a sickening certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. I tried to ignore it at first. It seemed like the kind of thing you brush off when you're stressed. Little oddities, weird coincidences, things that don't make sense in the moment but fade away if you're distracted enough. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. But deep down, I knew. I knew something wasn't right. And every day the feeling of being off grew stronger, as though I was living in a world that had started to crack at the edges. It began with small things, details I would have missed if I wasn't paying close attention. The first one happened when I was making coffee in the morning. I remember it so clearly. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of torrential downpour that made the whole world feel like it was trapped in a fog of water. I stood by the window, watching the street outside. That's when I saw him. A man, standing perfectly still just across the street. He wore a dark coat, and his face was hidden beneath the brim of his hat. I thought it was nothing, just another passerby caught in the rain, waiting for shelter. But when I looked again, I felt a jolt in my chest. He was still there, not moving an inch, not even a twitch. I blinked, confused, and turned back to the counter to finish making my coffee, trying to shake off the chill crawling up my spine. but something made me look back. Something inside me told me to check again. There he was, standing in the same spot, but this time his head tilted slightly as if he was looking at me, watching me. I don't know how long I stared. The seconds bled into each other, time slowing until all I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my ears. It felt like I couldn't breathe. Something was wrong, something I couldn't explain. He wasn't just standing there, he was waiting. Waiting for something or someone. I tore my eyes away, shaking my head, convincing myself it was the storm playing tricks on my mind. A few more glances at the clock, and the man was gone. Just like that, no sign of him, not even a shadow. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was the weather. But as I tried to brush it off, something told me that wasn't it. That man, him, wasn't a coincidence. The oddness didn't stop there. Over the next few days, things began to happen that didn't make sense. Things I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. It started with the whispers. I first noticed them when I was sitting on the couch, trying to read, my mind too restless to focus. It was a quiet sound at first, just a slight rustling in the background, like the wind moving through the trees. But when I focused on it, I realized it was coming from inside the apartment. I thought maybe the pipes were making noise, or the wind was sneaking through the cracks in the window. But that didn't explain the voices. Whispers? Software indistinct. Like someone was just beyond my sight. I'd turn around quickly, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. No one. Just me, alone in the room. But the whispers kept coming, following me, drifting just out of reach. It was maddening. I tried to block it out, turning up the volume on the TV or putting on music, but it was always there, lurking in the corners of my mind. One night, as I tried to bury myself in a book, I felt it again, the whispers. Only this time, they were different, more distinct, louder. I snapped the book shut, heart racing, and looked around the room. Everything was still. But then, I noticed something strange. The pages of the book I had just closed, there were words on them. Tiny, barely noticeable. Written in a strange, faded ink. My hands trembled as I opened the book again. There it was, like it had always been there. My name. Rachel Adams. Written across the page, clear as day, but the ink was nearly invisible unless the light hit it just right. I didn't remember writing it. I didn't remember anyone writing it. The book hadn't been touched, but somehow, there it was, etched into the paper, waiting for me to find it. I slammed the book shut, feeling the blood drain from my face. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. How was this happening? The following day, I thought I was losing my mind. I tried to shake off the eerie feeling, but it wouldn't let go. I went to the bathroom to wash my face, to reset. I didn't even look at the mirror at first, but when I did, I froze. There were smudges on the glass. I wiped at them, but the marks wouldn't go away. It was like they were part of the mirror itself, etched into it as though someone had dragged their fingers across the surface. And that's when I saw it. A name. Written backward, as if someone had written it from the other side of the glass. Invisible until you looked close enough. My name. Rachel Adams. I stepped back, my head spinning. How could this be? How could it be me? I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, oppressive. I wiped at the mirror again, but the marks didn't disappear. They stayed. I needed to get out. I needed to leave, but I couldn't. I felt trapped, in my own home, in my own mind. Later that day, something else happened. The man, him, was back. I saw him again, outside the window, just like before. The same dark coat, the same wide-brimmed hat, his face hidden in shadows. But this time, he wasn't standing still. No, this time he was smiling. The smile was chilling, too knowing, too familiar. And it wasn't the smile of a stranger, it was a smile of someone who knew me. It was as if he'd seen me before, as if he was expecting me. My blood ran cold, my vision narrowing. I turned away from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. This couldn't be happening, this wasn't real. But then the phone rang. I didn't even have to look at the caller ID. I knew. I knew who it was before I picked it up. It was my voice. But this time, it was colder. Distant. "Rachel, you didn't listen, did you? It's happening. The loop is already starting. You can't stop it. No one can." The line went dead. And that's when I realized it. I was already too deep into this. There was no way out. I didn't want to pick up. I knew, deep down, that it was a mistake. But the phone kept ringing, louder now, more insistent. My breath hitched in my throat as the sound reverberated through the empty apartment. I looked at the caller ID, my own name flashing back at me in cold, steady light. Rachel Adams. I felt my chest tighten. It was happening again. I had no choice but to answer. Part of me thought if I didn't, if I ignored it, maybe I could stop it. But I knew better. I knew I was already too deep into this, whatever this was, to turn back. I picked up the phone. "Hello," I said, my voice barely a whisper. It sounded weak, even to me, but the fear that gripped my chest was too strong. I wasn't sure I could handle hearing it again, hearing my own voice speak words that felt like they came from some distant place, a place I didn't want to visit. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was my voice, but it wasn't mine. It was cold, detached, like a hollow echo of myself, stretching from a place I didn't want to know. "Rachel, it's happening again." The words cut through the line, sharp and chilling. I could hear the desperation in them, even though they weren't my words. I could barely breathe, let alone speak. The weight of the words pressed down on me, heavier than any burden I'd ever known. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream, to shut it out, but I couldn't. "Who is this? Please, just tell me what's happening." The voice sighed, faint and ragged. "I'm you, from the future. I'm trying to warn you. You don't have much time. It's too late for me, but maybe you can still change it." The world around me spun, the edges blurring as I tried to process the words. This couldn't be happening. This was insane. "What do you mean? Change what? What's happening? What is this?" "You're caught in it, Rachel. You're in the loop." The voice sounded more frantic now, as if it was reaching out from somewhere distant, a place where it had already failed. "I've been trying to warn you, but I couldn't stop it. I couldn't get out, and now it's your turn. You're about to make the same mistake. You've already started it." I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, like something was pressing in on me. My fingers tightened around the phone, but I couldn't make sense of what I was hearing. "I don't understand. I don't understand what you mean. What mistake?" The voice was trembling now, barely holding on. "You'll see. You'll know when it happens. I can't stop it, Rachel. Time is already moving in circles. The loop is set. You've already begun it. There's nothing you can do to break it, nothing I can do." I stumbled back, my legs giving out beneath me. The words, the loop, echoed in my mind. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room and shut everything out, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. "You're going to get trapped, just like me," the voice whispered, as if I were hearing the last remnants of someone's desperate plea for help. "We're already gone, Rachel, but you still have a chance. You have to listen. You have to stop him." "Stop who?" I choked out. "Who do I need to stop?" The line crackled with static, the voice slowing, as if it was fading away with each passing moment. "You'll figure it out. You'll know when you see him. But it's already too late, Rachel. You're already caught. Just like I am. Just like we both are." The silence that followed was suffocating. The phone line went dead, and I was left with nothing but the weight of the words hanging in the air, pressing down on me. My head spun, and for a long moment I couldn't move. The fear was crawling up my spine, clawing its way through my chest. I looked around the apartment, as if the walls themselves would answer me, but everything was still, silent. There was nothing here but the echo of my own breath, and the growing dread that something had already changed. I staggered to the window, desperate for some form of reality, something to ground me. But when I looked outside, I saw him. There, in the shadowed street, standing perfectly still in the rain, was the man. The figure I had seen before, the one who had been watching me. His coat billowed in the wind, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. But this time, I could see it. This time, his face was clear, and it was mine. I stumbled back from the window, the phone still clenched in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. The world was spinning, every fiber of my being screaming at me to run, to do something. But I was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then the phone rang again. I didn't answer it. I couldn't. The storm had turned violent, like the sky itself was coming undone. The wind howled outside my window, rattling the panes with a ferocity that felt unnatural, like it was trying to break through the walls. The shadows inside the apartment seemed to stretch longer, twisting unnervingly as I paced the room, the unease crawling under my skin, gnawing at me from every corner. Every creak of the old floorboards, every flicker of the dim light felt like a warning, a whisper that something was wrong, that I wasn't alone in the way I thought I was. I had locked the door hours ago, but it didn't matter. It never seemed to matter anymore. The silence felt wrong, too still for comfort. My skin prickled with the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Something was out there. Someone. I stopped by the window, staring out at the rain-drenched streets, searching for something, anything, that could make sense of the chaos inside me. It was in that moment, the quiet before the next storm, when I heard it. A knock. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible against the backdrop of the storm. But then it came again, more insistent, sharp, like someone tapping their fingers against the door in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Knock. 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 I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest, a wild thrum of dread. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard it, but the sound continued, each knock louder than the last. My stomach twisted into a knot and I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Who could it be? It couldn't be James. He wasn't due back for hours. And there was no one else who would come here. No one. So why was someone knocking at my door? I stared at the door, my hand hovering near the knob but unwilling to touch it. The knock came again, slow and measured, like it was expecting an answer. I swallowed, my throat dry, and against every instinct telling me to turn around and run, I moved toward the door. Every step felt like a mistake. Every breath came harder than the last. The moment I reached the door, the fear settled deep in my bones. The knob felt icy under my fingers as I turned it. Why am I doing this? The question repeated in my head, but it didn't matter. I opened the door. And there, standing in the flickering shadow of the hallway, was a figure. A man. His form was obscured by the rain and the dark, but I could see the silhouette clearly. The long, dark coat, the wide-brimmed hat that covered most of his face. He was taller than I expected, his frame imposing even from a distance. The rain dripped from the edges of his coat, pooling at his feet. But he didn't move. He just stood there, still, waiting. The knock had stopped, but the silence that followed was suffocating, thick with a kind of tension that made my chest tighten. I wanted to close the door. I wanted to slam it shut and lock myself inside, but I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on him, and a sickening realization curled in my gut. There was something about him, something familiar, that made my pulse race. "Who are you?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice shaking, the words too small in the face of the terror that gripped me. The man didn't answer immediately. He didn't even move. He just stood there as if he were waiting for something, waiting for me to understand. "I'm you," he said then, his voice low and gravelly. But it was unmistakable. It was mine. But it wasn't. It was like my voice had been dragged through 1,000 lifetimes, hollowed out and reshaped into something unrecognizable. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. What do you mean?" I whispered, my chest tightening. "Who are you?" The man, no, the stranger, took a slow step forward, the soft scrape of his boots on the floor echoing in the silence. He didn't need to say another word. The air around me grew heavier, like the very space I occupied had been infected with his presence. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my body refused to obey. "I'm you," he repeated, his voice like a low, painful whisper, pulling at the edges of my sanity. "From the future. You're going to learn what I already know. You're going to make the same mistakes I did." I felt my heart stop for a beat. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't happening. "No," I whispered. "No, that's impossible. You're lying. You're not me. You can't be." He stepped closer, the cold from his coat radiating toward me, and I flinched, stepping back instinctively. "I'm not lying, Rachel," he said, his tone growing firmer, colder. "I'm you, and you're in the same trap I've been in, the same loop. You're already caught. You just don't know it yet." I could barely breathe. The words seemed to wrap around my chest, tightening, squeezing the air out of me. I stumbled back, but the stranger didn't move. He just stood there watching me. "You're trapped, Rachel," he continued, his voice hollow, resigned. "Time is repeating itself, just like it did for me. And there's nothing you can do to stop it." I wanted to scream, to shout that this wasn't real, that he was some twisted illusion my mind had created. But a small part of me, the part that was too afraid to admit what was happening, knew he was telling the truth. He was me, from the future. And that meant everything I had known about my life was a lie. The walls around me seemed to close in, the air growing thick, suffocating. I wanted to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. "You can't escape it, Rachel," the man said softly, his words dripping with something I couldn't place. "You're already in the loop, just like I am." I felt the room spin, my world tilting sideways, the edges of everything blurring together. He stepped forward again, his hand stretching out toward the door, and I was suddenly aware, too aware, that I was not in control anymore. "Stop!" I gasped, my voice breaking. "Please, just leave." But his hand was already on the door. He didn't push it. He didn't have to. The door groaned under his touch as if it too was waiting for something. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he stepped back, his shadow falling across the threshold. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The weight of his words had already shattered whatever little sense of control I had left. The door clicked shut, leaving me in the silence. The air felt thicker now, heavier with the knowledge that I wasn't alone in this. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't outrun the truth. The loop was already in motion, and there was no escape. I don't know how long I stood there, my hand still clutching the door, staring into the empty hallway where the man, the stranger, had been just moments before. His presence lingered in the air, suffocating, heavy. It was as though the walls themselves had absorbed him, and now they were pressing in around me, threatening to crush me under the weight of the truth I had just heard. I should have slammed the door. I should have locked it and hidden myself away from everything, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't run. I couldn't escape the sick feeling that had settled in my chest, suffocating me from the inside. I had to understand. I had to make sense of it. But the more I tried to think, the more the walls seemed to close in, suffocating my thoughts. The loop. He kept saying it. The loop. My mind couldn't grasp it. Couldn't wrap around the idea that everything I'd known, was already set in motion. That the life I thought I had was already predetermined, a cycle I couldn't break. And then came the knock, a slow, deliberate tap. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed in the silence, louder than any thunder. The sound crawled up my spine like an invisible hand pulling at me. My breath hitched in my chest. No, not again. It couldn't be. My heart raced as the knocking grew more insistent, as though the door itself were reaching out to me, pulling me toward it. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave, to escape, but I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, my legs frozen, my body unwilling to obey. The knock came again, just a fraction louder. Tap, tap, tap. I don't know how I managed to move. Maybe it was the sheer weight of it, the inevitability pressing down on me, pushing me forward. But I found myself standing in front of the door again, my hand on the knob, feeling its coldness seep into my skin like it was made of ice. I opened it. I had to, and there he was, the man, the stranger. Only, this time, he wasn't a shadow in the hallway. He wasn't just some figure haunting the corners of my vision. No, this time, he was real. He was right in front of me, standing on the other side of the threshold, his face obscured by the brim of his wide hat. I wanted to scream, to slam the door shut and pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. He stood there, unmoving, silent, just like before. But now, there was something different, something heavier about him. It was as if the very air around us had thickened, become heavier, and every breath I took felt like I was drowning in it. And then he looked up. Slowly, deliberately, as if he wanted me to see him, as if he needed me to recognize him. I felt the world stop. The room seemed to tilt. Because when he lifted his head, I saw it. I saw myself. My face. The blood drained from my face as I stared back at my own reflection, distorted in ways that made it seem more like a nightmare than reality. His eyes, my eyes, were empty, hollow, and yet full of something unspeakable. A deep, fathomless void that swallowed everything in its path. And the smile on his lips, my lips, was twisted, mocking, as though he knew something I didn't, as though he had already seen everything that was about to happen, and I was too blind to understand it. "No," I whispered, the word barely leaving my lips. I stepped back, my heart racing in my chest, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. It was like staring into a mirror that didn't reflect reality, like the very fabric of my existence was being torn apart at the seams. "No, you can't be." He tilted his head slightly as if considering me. "Do you see it now?" he asked, his voice low and quiet. But it was my voice, unmistakable, even though it was coated with something dark, something that didn't belong. "Do you understand?" My body trembled as I fought to keep my composure. My mind was in chaos, a whirlwind of confusion and terror. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. I began, my words stumbling over each other. I don't understand. How are you me? How is this possible? He stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, the movement so smooth it was almost predatory. I'm you, Rachel, from the future, and I've been where you are. I've seen what's coming. I've tried to stop it, but it's already too late. No, I choked out. No, this isn't happening. You're not real. He didn't flinch, didn't move. I am real. You are real. And I'm the proof that you'll never escape. Not now. Not ever. I recoiled, my hands shaking as I clutched the doorframe for support. His words crashed into me like a tidal wave, drowning me. You're already caught in the loop, Rachel, the same one I'm stuck in, the same one that keeps repeating no matter what you do. I felt the air in the room grow even heavier, suffocating me. I wanted to scream, to slam the door and pretend it was all a nightmare, but I couldn't move. My body wouldn't obey me. What loop? I gasped, trying to steady my voice, though it was a futile effort. What are you talking about? He took another slow step forward, his cold, empty eyes locked onto mine. You're trapped, just like I was. You will be, over and over again. It's already happening, it's already begun, and it will never end. His words were like chains wrapping around my chest, tightening with every syllable. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream, to wake up from whatever nightmare I was trapped in, but the truth was right there, staring me in the face, and there was nothing I could do to deny it anymore. I gasped, my voice trembling. I can't be, no, I'm not like you, I'm not. You already are, he interrupted, his voice soft, almost mournful. You will be. You're already me in the making, you just don't know it yet. A cold wave of realization washed over me, and for the first time, I understood. I wasn't just caught in some twisted dream. I wasn't trapped in some illusion. No, I was caught in time. A time that kept looping, resetting, dragging me back to the same starting point over and over again until I became him. The man, the stranger, wasn't just me. He was my future. He was what I was destined to become. And I couldn't escape. The door seemed to press closer, closing in on me as his shadow engulfed the threshold. I backed away, my chest tight with panic. I was suffocating. The man, the future me, smiled just slightly. It wasn't a comforting smile. It wasn't kind. It was knowing. It was the smile of someone who had already seen the end of the story and was waiting for the next chapter. You'll see, he whispered, his voice fading into the oppressive silence that followed. You'll understand when it happens again. When the loop starts over, when you wake up. And then, like a shadow in the night, he was gone. Vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone. But I wasn't alone, not really. I had already become him. The loop had already started again. The apartment was silent now. The storm outside had stopped, but the air inside felt heavier than ever before. I was still standing by the door, my hand pressed against the cold wood, as though I could somehow keep everything outside of it locked away. But nothing would stop it. The truth was already inside, thick in the air around me. It hung like a fog, suffocating everything it touched. I couldn't breathe. I was trapped. It wasn't just a passing feeling anymore. I knew it. I had always known, deep down, that something was wrong. But now I could see it clearly. The loop, the endless cycle. The man, the stranger, or whatever he was, had shown me the truth. And now I couldn't deny it. I was part of it. I was the one who had already stepped into the trap. I staggered back into the apartment, my legs unsteady beneath me. The walls felt like they were closing in, the room growing smaller with every step I took. I was suffocating, but I couldn't run. I couldn't escape. I reached for the window, desperate for some clarity, for some sense of normalcy. But as I stood there, staring out at the rain-drenched street, my pulse hammering in my ears, I saw him again. The figure. He was standing just beneath the street lamp, bathed in its sickly glow. He was just standing there, motionless. The same man, the same me. I felt my heart stop. No, this couldn't be happening again. I had just seen him, felt him, standing at the door, talking to me, telling me what was happening. I had already seen my future, I had already been given the truth. But this? This wasn't real, it couldn't be. Yet, there he was. He stood completely still, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat, just like the first time. And that feeling, the sense of being watched, of being hunted, washed over me like ice water. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but I could feel it deep in my bones. The loop wasn't just a concept, it wasn't some abstract thing, it was real, and I had already become a part of it. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. I knew what I had to do. I had to lock the door. I had to hide. But my feet didn't obey. I couldn't move. The phone rang. I didn't have to check the caller ID. I already knew who it was. I had already heard this sound 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways, and yet each time it was the same. The phone was a lifeline I didn't want to answer, but I knew, deep down, that I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. I walked toward the phone, my legs like lead. I picked it up, my hand shaking as I held it to my ear. "Hello?" My voice cracked, the words barely leaving my lips. The voice that answered sent a chill straight to my soul. It was my own. But it wasn't. It was distorted, hollow, like it had been stretched and torn by time itself. "Rachel," the voice whispered, "it's time." No, not again. I can't do this again, but it didn't matter. The voice continued, steady and unyielding. "You've made it this far. You've seen the truth. But you still don't understand. You can't escape. You'll never escape." I felt the blood drain from my face. The walls around me seemed to close in, suffocating me. The loop. I had already been warned. I had already seen the man, the stranger who was me, standing at the door, telling me everything. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice trembling. "What do you mean? How can I stop this? How can I make it stop?" "You can't," the voice answered. "It's already happening. It's been happening all along. You just don't remember. You'll never remember. You'll never escape." I staggered back, the phone slipping from my hand. It clattered to the floor, but the voice didn't stop. It didn't need to. The words were already inside my head, echoing through my mind, repeating over and over again, like a broken record. "You'll never escape." The apartment grew colder, the darkness creeping in around me. I couldn't move. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, the weight of the truth settling on me like an anchor, pulling me down into the abyss. I looked back out the window, desperate to find something, anything, to pull me out of this nightmare. But when I looked, the man was gone. He wasn't gone. He was standing in the hallway just behind me, his silhouette looming in the doorway. My body went cold. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat, and there he was, me. The same figure, the same man, the same future me. His face was hidden, just like before, beneath the brim of his hat, but this time I didn't need to see his face. I knew who he was. He wasn't just a stranger. He wasn't just someone who was haunting me. No, he was me. I felt the world shift beneath my feet. My mind, already reeling from the phone call, was starting to crack. The truth had already been shown to me. I had already seen the loop, but now it was undeniable. It was real. "You're already in it," he said softly, his voice low and knowing. It was my voice. My voice. "You've already made the same mistake I did. There's no way out, Rachel. There never was." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was trapped, caught in the cycle. I could feel it, deep in my bones, the cold truth of it. "You'll wake up again," he continued, "and you'll try again, and you'll fail again, and it will never end." I sank to my knees, the weight of his words crushing me. The man, myself, stepped forward, his cold gaze falling on me like a shadow. And then, in the same voice that was mine but wasn't, he said the words that shattered everything. "You've already seen the end, Rachel. You just don't remember. It's always the same." And that's when I understood. I wasn't just trapped in a loop. I had become part of it. There was no escape. I was the one who set it in motion. I was the one who would live it over and over again. And no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I would always wake up. I would always fail. I looked at the man one last time, the twisted reflection of myself, and realized with a sickening certainty I would never escape. The loop was my prison, and it had already begun again. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with me here at Frightful Whispers. Remember, the darkness holds secrets, but also whispers truths to those who dare to listen. If tonight's tale sent shivers down your spine, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep the fire of fright alive. Rest easy, but keep one eye open, for the night is never truly still. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay curious, and let the whispers guide you.